Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Bentley. I am just here to get our webinar started. Thank you all for joining, and sorry that we started a little bit late. We actually are having just a few technical issues on some of the extras that we were hoping to embed in the webinar. We think we've got a workaround with it, but just be patient with us. And if some of those extras don't work, then we'll find a good way to share them with you. I do just want to remind everybody to, if possible, not to use your VPN because sometimes that slows things down. And I know my friend Shawnell is on the webinar. Shawnell, are there any other helpful tips that would like to share?
Yeah, thanks, Bentley. Hi, Decal friends. I would just recommend to close any other apps that you may have up. So I know you're busy all the time with email, and maybe if you use a certain system like Koala or Gateway, it's best if you close all your applications, close out all your URLs to get the best service as possible. Hopefully, you're in a good area of your home so you can stay connected. But for whatever reason, we're recording the webinar. So if you lose sound or something happens during the broadcast, just know that we're recording it and you'll be able to access the full recording. And we just thank you for being with us today.
And thanks for your patience. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Amy Jacobs.
Thank you, Bentley, and thank you everyone for joining us for our Decal staff update, virtual update. It's good to be with you all again virtually. I will say, when we last had our staff webinar, I didn't think it would be this long that we would still be at the office, but we are, and so we're dealing with it the best we can, right? I definitely have better days than others, but we're getting the work done, and I'm really proud to be part of the Decal team. So today, we thought it was a good time to get back together because there's a lot that's been going on at Decal. The entire Decal team has continued the great work that we do, although it looks a little bit different these days. And so I really wanted an opportunity for all of the executive cabinet members to share with you everything that's been going at Decal. I know you more than likely know what's going on in your own division, but you may not know what's going on in the rest of the agencies. So that's one of the purposes of today's webinar. We hope to have a little bit of fun. As Bentley mentioned, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. We did do a dry run yesterday like we always did, but you never know. We'll see if we can get it to work out because I think you'll like what we have planned if we can get it to work out. If not, it's not the end of the world. And then we also have a presenter from UGA that I will introduce in a minute to provide some information just on COVID-19 in general. We thought it might be helpful to all of you. So again, thank you for joining us. We're considering this our quasi all staff meeting, maybe a little entertainment, but we can't provide you lunch this time. So I hope you grab lunch and can be attentive for our webinar with some really great information. So next, let me walk through the agenda. Bentley, can you advance the slide?
It should be advanced. So you're not seeing it?
I do not see it.
Now you should. My bad.
I do see it. All right. So this is what we have planned for the next hour or so. We do have a work from home montage that we're hoping we can play next. Then we're going to hear, as I mentioned, from Dr. Grace Bagwell Adams on some COVID-19 information and some resources. She is at UGA and provided us an update a couple weeks ago, and we thought that all staff might like to hear all the information that she has to share. Then we'll also hear from our Director of Research, Randy Hudgens. We are a very data-driven agency, and we like to use data to make our decisions. And so Randy will share with you some of that data that we use on a daily basis in some cases to make decisions. Then, if all works, we do have some quick, fun polls to just see how you're feeling. Then I have some updates I'll share with you. We do have an update on COVID-19 related leave that you received an email about last week, but Ryan Ringsred will provide some more details on that. Then we'll have our division updates. Then we will hopefully have a surprise video. I know it's all going to work out. And then, of course, as you remember, we gave you the opportunity to submit questions to us. And so we received between 30 and 40 questions. And what we did was there were obviously some common themes. So I believe we have 4 or 5 of the most common questions that I will answer at the end. And anything that I don't get to, we will make sure we put in the FAQ so that you will have an answer to your question. and then we'll do a closing. So I'm crossing my fingers that we can play the work from home montage, and I'll say a few more words and maybe we can get it up and running.
Okay,
as you remember, we asked you to send us what?
Oh, I need to probably turn it over, make Randy the presenter screen. So when you're ready, just let me know and I'll check with him.
Okay. So just real quickly, we asked you to send in your work from home photos. And so our very talented Gabby Garza, she's a new Decal staff member. She's the marketing and outreach specialist for nutrition, put together a really fun, cool, and sometimes entertaining work from home montage. So we will see if we can roll that. So Bentley, can you?
Sure, and I'm going to check. Randy, do I change the presenter to you?
Yes, you can go for it. We'll make it work.
All right. So I am changing the presenter to Randy. And Randy, you should be the presenter now.
All right, let's see. Everybody ready for a wonderful video?
Randy, how is this? Is it working? I can't see from my screen.
It doesn't appear to be. Let me try this one.
We'll try one more thing, and if not, we'll go ahead to Dr. Bagwell-Adams and for you, and then we'll see if we can come back to it. Again, for everyone, we did rehearse this the other day, but just having some technical difficulties with the software.
There it is, Randy. I see it on my screen now.
Oh, wonderful. Hopefully we'll have audio.
Yep, let's try that out.
Any audio?
No audio. I think the stream is running slowly.
Maybe we should.
We can email this out to everyone or upload it in Polar, and everyone has access to Polar and can check out that video. It's really nice. I can't wait for everyone to see it. Let's turn it back over to Bentley, and we can keep on going with our staff webinar.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you
Randy,
guys have an awesome audio track. You were right, Shawno.
So, Randy, can you go back and make me the presenter? All right. Okay. And Commissioner, I'm turning it back to you, and you should see the COVID-19 information resources on your screen.
Excellent. Well, when we do send out the montage, please be sure to watch it because it is great. I love seeing all of your pictures and some of your pets and some of your family members. It was actually good to see some faces because a lot of times we only hear voices these days. So Gabby, thank you for your work on that. It really turned out great, and I know everyone will enjoy seeing it. So our next section of the agenda is on COVID-19 information and resources. As I mentioned earlier, we heard from Dr. Grace Bagwell-Adams a couple of weeks ago, just trying to get some information on COVID-19. If you're like me, there's a lot of information out there. Some of it contradicts each other, and sometimes we just need to be grounded in what the actual facts are. Obviously, we're not medical professionals, but Dr. Grace Bagwell-Adams gave us a lot of really good information that we thought it would be great for you to know so that you can have the best information, the most accurate information, and information to keep you and your family safe. Dr. Grace Bagwell Adams is an associate professor and assistant dean for outreach, engagement, and equity in the Department of Health Policy and Management at the University of Georgia, and she's been advising UGA and Athens-Clarke County around issues related to COVID-19. After you hear from Dr. Bagwell Adams, she will then turn it over to our own Randy Hudgens, who will share with you some of the data that we've been using to make decisions here at DeKalb. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Bagwell Adams. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Jacobs, for the gracious introduction and welcome. And I look forward to talking with you all today. As Commissioner Jacobs mentioned, I'm in the College of Public Health at the University of Georgia, and there's lots and lots of information I could share today, but I've got about 10 minutes, and I'm going to go over some of the main points that I think are important for not just individuals and DeKalb employees to know, but communities to know as well. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I think if anything, we all need to be the best stewards possible that we can for our own health. And that goes for not just you as individuals, but your entire household. What we know about the way that COVID-19 transmits is that once an individual gets sick, if they're living with other people, then it's likely that those people, of course, are exposed and they're also vulnerable to infection. So I think if you can just be familiar with some of the symptoms, some of the ones that have been most publicized, of course, include a fever. Sometimes that fever presents as low grade, which is below 100.4, and sometimes as a high fever. A dry cough is also a common symptom that's been reported, of course, in mainstream media. I think that it's also important to remember that a common COVID-19 symptom is losing your sense of smell, losing your sense of taste. So those are just some basic things to watch out for. And I think if you can start thinking about educating yourself not just on the symptoms, but also thinking about how to really empower yourself and your family members in your household to do some self-screening, that would be great. So keeping a watch out for the symptoms. And one way that you can do that is by having some basic things at home, like a home thermometer. Many of you probably already have those. That way you can monitor yourself. And another thing that has become common, especially for folks who have been diagnosed with COVID-19, is to get an oximeter at home, which is a very affordable. It's about $20. You can get it on Amazon, thing that you can have in your house, and it actually just measures. There's a picture on the right side of the slide here. It actually just measures the oxygen level in your blood along with your pulse. And so anything above a 95 is considered normal. But those are just some basic things that you could think about in terms of self-screening, self-education. And again, focusing on not just yourself, but your entire household, thinking of yourselves as a unit. And along with that, if any one of you starts experiencing symptoms, it's good to go ahead and think about getting testing, if possible, for everyone, and self-isolating and quarantining if you can until you get those results. You can go to the next slide. Thanks. Okay, one of the biggest focus areas that has been prevalent, of course, in the media since March has been testing. I think there's a lot of confusion. One of the things I've observed in working with communities and hospital systems across the state and talking with individuals is that there's a lot of confusion around testing. And that is because there are actually several kinds of tests, but there is a gold standard in testing, and the best possible thing, kind of test that you can pursue if you yourself feel that you need to be tested is a nasal swab test that's called a PCR test. That's kind of the gold standard. It's the one that's going to be most sensitive and specific in terms of diagnosing active virus in your system. And this is the kind of test that's actually used and reported by the Department of Public Health. So I think that if I can share anything that you take away from this today, it's that having some of this information is really important to think about now, even if you're not sick or experiencing symptoms, so that you have a plan in place if you happen to get sick or experience symptoms. And one of the ways that you can have a plan in place is to go to the Department of Public Health's website and look locally and see where your Department of Public Health testing site is and become familiar with that. If you need access to a test, you can call the number that's associated with your local testing site and set up an appointment to do so. There are some concerning wait times right now and turnaround times in terms of getting access to a test and getting those results back. But I think the more that you can be familiar with how to access a PCR test and where to go, the better off you and your household will be, especially if you begin experiencing symptoms. The next thing I'll say, and last thing I'll say about testing is there are also a different series of tests called antibody tests. Antibody tests do not test for active infection in your system. They actually test to see if your body has produced something called antibodies to the virus. And so those are also tests that are on the market right now. Those are typically done via a blood draw. But again, that is not going to tell you whether you have an active virus in your system. That can potentially tell you whether you have built up some immunity to the virus and have actually had the virus in the past. We can go to the next slide. Okay, I think it's good to know and feel empowered not just about self-education, self-screening and testing, but also other best practices. And I know that many of you work in the field across the state, and for some of you, part of your daily job pre-COVID, of course, is going into child care centers. I think it's really important, not just before you go back out in the field, but even now in your daily errands, that you know what the best practices are. So the best evidence that we have shows that face masks are pretty critically important. I'm going to talk a little bit in a second about how some politics, I think, have entered unnecessarily into us fighting the pandemic. But what we know about face masks is that bottom line, they decrease the probability of transmitting the disease, and they really increase the probability of you being protected against the virus, not just you wearing the face mask, but other people wearing the face mask. Best case scenario is everybody's wearing masks out in public, and thus your protective factors really increase and decrease your vulnerability to exposure. The one thing I would say is about face masks is making sure that they're clean, only touching them if you've just washed your hands, and really practicing good hygiene whenever you're using face masks. I've gotten lots of questions about face shields. I think that they're a great complement to face masks, but not a substitute. And the reason is because it's a barrier in front of your face, but most face shields are open at the bottom, which still leaves exposure to aerosol if the virus is in the air. So again, think of them as complements, face shields as complements to face masks, not just substitutes. I think the last couple things I'll share about best practices is one of the focus areas has been around exposure time or exposure to the virus. It's not just whether or not you've been in public or standing around a group of people, it's also the length of time. So the longer that you're in a closed space, especially one that's not well ventilated with a group of people, the more your exposure risk increases. And typically, if you're exposed for more than 15 minutes around a large group of people in a small space, we see the risk for infection go up pretty dramatically. And so I think length of exposure time is important to remember as well. I think one of the most important tools that we have in our toolkit right now is just good ventilation. Simple things like opening a window, making sure that your ventilation systems in your households and in the places that you go, if you choose to spend time indoors somewhere, that they have good ventilation. That's really important because, again, the way that this virus spreads is through the air, and the better your ventilation is, the least likely you are to be exposed to the virus at levels that would actually then lead to infection. Next slide. Okay, this is something I'm really passionate about. So my discipline is health policy. I love studying policy. I think it's critically important. But unfortunately, with this particular pandemic, it's become extremely political. And I think that if we can all remember that this is a public health crisis, not a political crisis, we'll be a lot better off. So that really goes along with destigmatizing COVID-19 as a virus in general. We don't want to have a situation in our communities where people are shamed or feel like they are carrying a stigma around with them if they've been diagnosed with COVID, or if someone in their household has been diagnosed with COVID. We need to meet individuals and households and communities where there are lots of infections with empathy, with kindness, and really react to infection by doing what we can to make sure people have the resources they need to self-isolate, and then doing what education we can to keep further spread from happening. That's the only thing that we can do really to mitigate this, is to treat it as a public health crisis, which it is, not a political crisis. I think the second layer there is depoliticizing things like evidence-based practices like mask wearing. So masks, strangely, have taken on a very stigmatized sort of political orientation in and of themselves. And it's really a shame because, quite honestly, in the absence of a shelter-in-place policy, masks are really the only effective public health evidence-based tool that we have in our toolkit to fight the pandemic right now. And so I would just encourage you as public servants to be good stewards of that evidence base and really think critically about how we can really encourage communities and families, especially families with young children, to see themselves as being really stakeholders in the decision to protect the public's health and encouraging mask wearing until we get the pandemic to a point where it's under control enough where that's not necessary anymore. Next slide. Okay, we live in a really, really large state, millions and millions of people, 159 counties. There's a ton of geographic variation, socioeconomic variation. All of you know this. If you look on the right-hand side of this slide, what I've shown you is a map from July 24th. There's a scientist I'll talk a little bit more about in a second named Dr. Amber Schmidtke, and this really is just looking at, prior to the 24th of July, the 14-day increase in COVID-19 cases. I wanted to show you this map simply because of the tremendous variation you see here along these county boundaries and even the regional variation that you see. And I think often what we see, especially state agencies, kind of operate on a one-size-fits-all policy approach across the state. But the reality of this pandemic is that we're going to really have to focus in on taking a different approach to policy and even in decision making when it comes to things like deciding when people should return to field work or site visits. The length of the pandemic, what we know is that this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, I think to what the commissioner said, we're all sitting at home, working from home a lot longer than we originally thought. And I think that's only going to continue to be the case for the next 6 to 12 months based on the trends that we're seeing and the lack of therapeutics that we currently have to treat the pandemic. And so if you look at this map, I think what you see right now is, you know, hotspots along the coast and especially middle Georgia and then southwest Georgia, which was an early hotspot, kind of calming down a bit in terms of the 14-day increases. And so when you start considering decision making around returning to field work, it could be that certain regions or certain counties are able to do so before others, and that is a fluid situation and can change over time. So for example, southwest Georgia looks good right now, but in 2 to 3 months it could be reversed, and coastal Georgia could have calmed down after vacation season while southwest Georgia starts to increase. We just don't know yet, but I think it's something to keep an eye on and just to remember that we live in a really large state and we're going to have to veer away from one-size-fits-all policy approaches. Next slide. Okay. Another thing that Commissioner Jacobs said at the beginning is that we hear a lot of conflicting evidence and information, and I think that that's true. And it's really frustrating. Even as a scientist, I'm consistently frustrated by this because in addition to being a scientist, I'm also a parent. And you know, I think you see certain things that are stated as, well, we know this to be true about the virus, and then it changes. I think what we have to remember is just to be flexible. The evidence base is rapidly changing. Scientists all over the world are studying the clinical aspects of this, the economic impacts of this pandemic, the public health mitigation strategies that work the best, and we just are learning as quickly as possible. So I think flexibility, not just in our understanding of the virus, but also in the grace that we give science in general and the evidence base as it rapidly changes and as we learn. I think that's important. Just we have much left to learn about this. We've got to remember that. Next slide. Okay, I don't want to leave you empty-handed today. I think it's really important to know what some good resources are for you and your communities, and we've all been flooded with information. This is constantly on the news. In some sense, we all have COVID-19 fatigue. And so in recognizing that, I want to just mention a couple of resources that I think are critical that even if I wasn't in public health, these are the things I would probably be following. The first is, as I mentioned, there's a scientist named Dr. Amber Schmidtke, and she has a newsletter that she updates and releases Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays on the state of the pandemic in Georgia. And she actually has that. I put the link here. You can subscribe to her newsletter. It'll be delivered right to your email inbox. I found it to be really accessible, really succinct. It's evidence-based, data-driven, but she does it in a very nonpartisan, non-political way, which has been pretty refreshing. So I encourage you to check her out. And then finally, when it comes to what numbers you should be looking at for your community, a lot of us have focused on cases for a long time, and that metric is not particularly useful at this point, to be really honest with you. I think that it's far more important to look at measures like hospital capacity, and the best place that I've seen for that information is actually the Georgia Emergency Management has a Facebook page where they have daily regional hospital capacity updates. And so you can look at the map. This is a screenshot from their Facebook page update yesterday. You can look at the map. You can see where your county falls in terms of the region. And then you can look at the map that corresponds with that and how many beds are available. And the most important metric, I think, is how many critical care beds are available, because when COVID gets really intense in a community, the most important thing is having access to the care that you need. And so I live in Athens, that's in Region E, and right now, quite frankly, we're in a very dire situation because we have 0 critical care beds available, and that's been true since Friday. But I just think that keeping an eye on that is really important, and the GEMA Facebook page is a great place to do that. I hope this has been informative for you. I'm now going to turn it over to Randy Hudgens, and again, I thank you so much for your time, and I hope that all of you take care and stay safe and well.
Thank you, Grace. That was a wonderful presentation, and really enjoyed hearing some of those tips and just reminders. I had to laugh when you talked about face masks because we had some really nice ones that were made by a friend, and we quickly learned that they needed to be cleaned often because they can get a little funky. And so I completely agree with you on the, we're all learning about the COVID-19 all at the same time, and that creates a lot of opportunities to learn, but also a lot of frustrations across personal lives and trying to find care for families. And I've certainly found Amber Schmidtke's data very fascinating. Bentley actually turned that on to me the other week, and it has been hard for me to pull away from learning more about the DPH data from her visuals and her just her blog. So thank you for sharing that, and I definitely encourage all of you listening to check that out. So as I was introduced, I'm Randy Hudgens. I'm the Director of Research here, and I'm going to go through a little bit about what we've been able to collect and what we're learning in real time. So Bentley, if you'll take us to the next slide. I just wanted to give you a quick preview about some of the data that I'm going to share with you here today. And so we have a couple ongoing data efforts looking at ongoing analyses that include working with our IT department and our different program leads to collect and trend and visualize our administrative data that we are collecting here, and that our IT team has been fantastic at putting in some new systems and new abilities for us to track this kind of ever-changing pandemic for us. And we have also been working on different surveys across Georgia and across our communities and programs here at DeKalb to try and learn more about how our providers are responding to the pandemic. That includes how they have used the stable grant funds and what additional resources may be useful for them. We're also providing daily reporting efforts to our leadership team to help guide their policy decisions and the guidance that we're able to give as a department. And so as I said, we're using that data across the departments. We're trying to get across this knowledge gap we have with COVID and the impact it is having on childcare. And so we are working to provide guidance to the governor's office. We're working to try and advise on how and when we could possibly do on-site visits and what that might look like. And as I said, we're working to guide policy, such as working with the CAPS team to understand when children are attending programs or not, and how we can best support them through our different priority groups. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of data tables that I think you all will find interesting, that'll just show the landscape and how providers have responded across the state. You go to the next slide, Bentley. So this graph may take a minute to take in, but CCS collects within our Koala provider self-service. Providers are able to indicate whether or not they are temporarily closed or if they are open. And we are able to track that since about mid-March, when we were able to put this enhancement into our IT system. And so you'll see at the top, the dark kind of black color are those providers that are reporting closed. The gray are those providers that we have not heard from. They did not go in and indicate whether or not they were closed or open. And then that green color is all the providers that have indicated they are open. So if you followed the green, you'd see back in March 16th, when we first implemented this enhancement, there were not many providers that had indicated really whether they were open or closed. But as we went through April and started beginning to do provider webinars, we started seeing an increase in reporting, and we actually saw that the majority of providers had reported to us in mid-April. And then since April, especially going through June and now July, we've seen this an uptick in the number of providers that are reporting open. Whereas last week we had about 58% of program licensed providers reporting that they are open right now, which is a big change from earlier in April. And I believe those numbers are even closer to 60 or even 61% now. So that's really encouraging that providers are trying to open and provide care for families that need it. So if we want to, we can also look at this data not only over time, but we can also look at it regionally. So if Bentley will go to the next slide, this is that same information. It is just looking at it regionally. So on the right, you can see a map of the state, and it is shaded darker for those providers in the county that are reporting open, and lighter shades are for the number of providers in each county that fewer providers are reporting they're open. So you can see that it's a little bit scattered throughout the state. There doesn't seem to be a real trend, as you saw in the slide that Grace showed with the actual COVID-19 cases in the 14-day changing average. This does not mimic that map, but this does represent how providers across the state are responding to the pandemic at their community level. So you can see on the left, we've broken it out by DeKalb region and by child care learning centers, family child care learning homes, and then the total represents all licensed child care programs. So you can see both, you can see yourself if you know which region you work in, but then you can also look to see which county you may live in or which county possibly your child attends a program in, and see how that how those counties are responding compared to others. We not only can look at it regionally, we can look at all this information by program as well. So here we can look at how are programs responding to their temporary closure status, whether they are serve CAPS or they do not serve CAPS. So here the orange bar indicates licensed providers that do not serve CAPS, and the blue bar indicates providers that do serve CAPS. And you can see both for centers and families that providers that serve CAPS are more likely to be reporting they are open. And in fact, for centers where the majority of our children who receive CAPS attend, we can actually see that CAPS providers are almost twice as likely to be open during the pandemic. So that helps to guide some different policy decisions and just helps us better understand the landscape and how providers are responding. So we can look at these things by quality rated status, by different licensing statuses, and all sorts of different ways. But I just wanted to share one example with you here. Another encouraging way we can look at this information is through another data source that CCS captures when providers contact us regarding basically anything. Our CCS consultants log that information into a contact log. And so they have been recording when providers report to us that there has been an instance of COVID at a child care program. And so we've been able to take that data and try and visualize it to try and help understand where that impact is happening and when it is happening. So Bentley, if you'll go to the next slide. Here you can see on the left is a map of Georgia again that's showing where we have received reports of COVID-19 at a child care program. So far, as of July 7th, we had 91 reports of COVID at a child care program. 89 of those reports came from a licensed center and 2 came from family child care programs. That reporting has come from 35 different counties, and those 35 different counties are shaded from light blue to dark blue, depending on the number of cases that have been reported to us in each county. So you could see that DeKalb County here in the middle has had 8 reports at a child care program, and DeKalb County is one of our counties with the largest number of licensed programs in the state. You can see on the right that that's the same information. It's just by date. So we've created a calendar where you can see the darker the shade is the day that a report was made, and you can see that more reports have been made in June, which shouldn't be too surprising, as we know that more businesses with the executive orders and whatnot happening, that more businesses have started to open, and thus we would expect to see more cases of COVID occurring. What this data doesn't tell us is where these COVID-19 were actually contracted. We just know that a child care program reported that somebody at that center had told them that they had the virus. It does not mean that the virus was spread necessarily at that center or that something unique is happening at that center. It's just telling us where and when these reports are coming in. But certainly a good data point for us to follow as more programs open. I will point out these 91 programs represent less than 2% of all licensed programs in the state. So while it may look impactful with the dark shades of blue, we're still looking at a small percentage of our programs reporting to us right now that they're having any instances of COVID. And then finally, I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that we are sharing some of this information publicly and have been for the last couple of months on our website. You can see there's a link at the top. But we are pulling in the DPH confirmed cases by county map, which is the map on the left in blue. We're pulling that in from DPH on a daily basis. And then we're also reporting our own temporary closure data and the counts of centers and family child care homes that are reporting closed in the state. So I encourage you to check that out. I know that we will be adding more features to this as we are able to, and happy to discuss any of this with any programs or any individuals on the webinar today who are interested in hearing more about all the data we're looking at. So thank you for listening today. And I will pass it back off to Bentley or the commissioner.
Thank you, Randy. That was great, and thank you for sharing all that data that I get to see on a more regular basis. I thought it would be good for the entire Decal team to see what we're looking at and just kind of see what childcare looks like these days. And Grace, again, thank you for being with us. You gave us some really great information. I've already ordered my oximeter, and so it should be here on Friday. So I encourage you all to go on Amazon if you want to. So Bentley, we're supposed to have a commercial break with some polls. Is that going to work out for us?
I think this is going to work out for us. So
Okay.
I have to say, when I saw Grace's slides yesterday, I ordered one of those things too. So, and mine's coming tomorrow as well. So yes, you can get them off Amazon, and they seem to have a lot of different choices and even some different colors. So anyway, I was glad to get that information. And I just want to say, Randy, great work on doing that. I think we're all always impressed with the data and the way that we use data in this department. So that was good. So we're going to try a poll. We've got 3 simple questions. You all should see a poll now that says basically describe your mood today. And you should be able to vote. Let me see. I'm sharing it now. So you should be able to see that, and you can report whether it's sunshine, cloudy, rainy, thundery, or rainbow. So, are people able to see this?
I see it, Bentley.
You can't?
You can,
I do see
Oh,
it.
but I don't see people.
Okay.
It's just a big lie.
So I don't see, are people able to vote? So I'm hearing that people can see it, but they can't vote. Well, we're just batting 1,000, aren't we, Commissioner? Let me try this one more time. Okay, so let's, we've got another one now that we're going to try. What do you miss the most? Movies, concerts, traveling, or family gatherings? Oh, it looks like people are able to vote on this one. Those of you that are listed as panelists, keep in mind you're not able to vote. So we'll give this a few more minutes. Commissioner, I don't know if you're able to see, but we are about 63, 66% have voted.
I cannot see that.
Okay. We are doing well.
Good.
Well, and since you can't see it, I'm going to ask you to, as we get closer, to guess what's the highest percentage. Would you say it's movies,
Okay.
concerts, traveling, or family gatherings? We're at 80%.
I would have to guess traveling would be my first guess. Either traveling or family gatherings. Probably
Okay.
because those would be my 2.
Mine would be concerts.
Yes,
I will
of
say
course.
that concerts is not winning, but we are at 82%. So we'll go ahead.
great.
And so the commissioner said traveling and family gatherings. I would say that those are the top 2, and I've got my friend Susan here with me, socially distanced, appropriately apart at Decal. Susan, do you think it's traveling or family gatherings? Which is the top vote getter?
I'm gonna say family gathering.
So Susan is going to say family gatherings. I'm going to close the poll. Let's share. And are you all able to see the results?
Yes.
Are you able to see those?
Yes.
Okay, so 49% traveling, 36% family gatherings, 8% movies, and 7% concerts. Well, I don't know what that says
Sorry,
about
Bentley.
my book or my family, but either way. All right, we've got one more poll. So let me launch this. What's the first thing you'll do when things return to normal? Visit and hug family, go to the beach or mountains, eat at your favorite restaurant, or all of the above? We should be collecting responses now. It was kind of slow at first, but it's going up now. We're at
Good.
67%, 70%. Okay, we're at 81%. Commissioner, what would you say is the most common response if you had to guess? And what
Visit
would be
and
your-
hug family. I'm going to say the most common is visit and hug family.
Okay, unfortunately, that's not the most common, but actually the most common is all of the above, and I'm going to close the poll and share the results, and you can see.
Oh, okay.
All right, are you able to see?
I do see that, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, that was our nice little commercial break. So 2 out of the 3 questions worked. That's a 67% success rate, so I will take that. And with that, then Commissioner, we will turn to your updates. I will say as a point of clarification, when we get to the 3-2-1s, we do have a plan for some switching, so I can explain that to the group when we're there.
Okay, great. Well, that was fun. I'm glad that the polls worked. That's a neat little thing to do in between. We know we're giving you a lot of information, so we're trying to make it a little fun at the same time. So I'm glad that worked. I can't see my updates yet, Bentley.
Yes, I'm looking to see what's there.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and start talking. I do have a few updates for everyone, and I'll just go ahead and say thank you for dealing with all of our little hiccups. I think our new theme is be flexible. You know, we're doing our best to try to entertain you at the same time as inform you, but we've had a few hiccups, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. And I do have a few updates for the group. So if you recall, I sent out a few emails to all staff about the FY 2021 budget. It was a little different this year because of COVID-19, and we didn't know our budget until the very end of June, and the new fiscal year starts on July 1. At the original request from the governor's office and the House Budget Office and the Senate Budget Office was for agencies to prepare to cut 14% of their budget, just given a decline in state revenues. Then we received some quasi-positive news that they weren't expecting 14%, but were expecting only 10%. So, you know, that helped a little bit. During all of that, there was a lot of media around what state agencies were proposing. And I think probably the most concerning was the need to furlough staff. And I reported to you then that that was not part of our plan, that I was not proposing to furlough any DECAL staff. And we did not do that. So I think the biggest takeaway from our budget that began on July 1st is no decal staff will be furloughed. So things should run just as usual for all of our staff. So I'm very thankful for that. I do believe that the Senate and the House worked very hard to help all state agencies not to have to furlough. In many instances, that was the only option they really had, just because of the way their budget was made up and how they spend their money. And so, but I do believe that they were able to help a lot of agencies so that state employees would not have to be furloughed. So that is my main takeaway for the budget. There are no furloughs for this fiscal year that began on July 1 for decal employees. So very good news. So we did have changes to 2 of our programs due to the budget reductions. One is the Quality Rated Subsidy Grants. So that's a form of our CAPS program, and it serves about 3,000 children through our grants model. And it's a great model. It was a very innovative model, been around for about, I would say, almost 5 to 6 years. But it costs us more than a regular CAPS scholarship. So when we were thinking about what can we propose as a reduction that will have the least amount of impact to families, because most of our state general funds is used to pay for CAPS and CAPS scholarships. And so we really had to focus on how can we have the least impact to CAPS and the families that CAPS serves by providing access to childcare. So what we proposed and what the final outcome was, the Quality Rated Subsidy Grants were eliminated. But the good news is those 3,000 children will still receive a CAPS scholarship. So as I mentioned, the CAPS subsidy grant, the Quality Rated Subsidy Grants are more expensive than a regular CAPS scholarship. So we're able to transition those 3,000 children from the grant to a regular CAPS scholarship and get to the savings that we needed for that 10% reduction. So children on CAPS that were receiving it through a grant should not receive any interruption in their service. So that was very positive. Our Quality Rated Subsidy Grant staff is working very, very hard to get all of those children transitioned as quickly as they can. And that staff will remain working in the CAPS division. So I would say as far as budget cuts go, that's as positive as you can expect. For Georgia Pre-K, no cut to the actual pre-K program or the funding that goes out the door to pay for pre-K classrooms. So should be no impact on teachers or assistant teachers, on the number of classrooms, on the number of days, or anything like that. There were a few administrative cuts, some reductions in some contracts and some computer refresh money, but nothing that will impact our pre-K program, nothing that will impact our pre-K decal staff. So we did have cuts, but the impact should not be felt by our decal staff. So I would say all in all, fairly good news as it relates to budget cuts. So next I want to talk a little bit about the stable grants and the survey. You may remember that all states received money for CCDF to help childcare. As you know, we are worried about the state of childcare and if they can recover from being closed or having low enrollment for so many months due to COVID-19. So Congress appropriated billions of dollars to states, and decal received about $140 million. And the direction we received from the feds was to send that money out as quickly as possible to childcare programs to help stabilize them, because we all know how important they are, not only for that early learning experience, but it also is critical for parents to be able to go to work. And so very quickly, I give a shout out to Woody Dover and our IT team put together a system and a process to get these grants out to all licensed programs. And so pretty final numbers, 3,871 licensed programs received a stable grant, and that totaled about $38.5 million. So obviously we have a little bit more money left, and what we are intending to do is probably another phase of stable grants to send that money out to childcare programs. We want to make sure we do that in the right way, and we want to make sure we do that in a way that helps childcare providers. And so we have done a survey with childcare providers. Carl Vinson Institute of Government did that for us. It just closed recently to give us an idea of how stable works for them, did it help them, what are their other needs, and then we'll make a decision on how we deliver the remaining money from the stable grants. So all in all, I would say that was successful, and I will say that child care programs overwhelmingly were very pleased, and we've heard anecdotally some very good positive stories of how it helped them in their business, whether it would be to continue to pay their staff if they were closed, to pay for the additional sanitation requirements and PPE requirements if they remained open. I've heard one provider enhanced the ventilation system in their program. So from what we can tell anecdotally, and we'll have better information when we get the survey results, is those grants were very well used by our child care community. A couple of upcoming events. We are planning another provider webinar on August 5th, which is just next week. And then we have our quarterly board meeting on August 27th, which we will hold virtually again. We held our last one in May virtually, and it went fairly well. And we think anything we can do virtually at this point, we should continue to do that. So we will have our board meeting virtually on August 27th. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about navigating back to school. I know that we've started to see all of the announcements of the school systems making decisions about what school will look like just next month for some systems. And some of those things are changing on a daily basis. Many of them, it looks like, will be a virtual start to school. Some are going back in person, some not. Some are going back in person, but maybe not full time. So it seems to me, when I look at a statewide view, it's not going to be like back to school usually is, and we understand that will have an impact on you as parents and as on employees. And so we want you to know that we recognize that's going to be difficult to balance, especially if your children don't have an option and will be doing virtual school. So I get that's going to be a balancing act between getting your job done from home and also helping your child manage their schoolwork. We want to be as flexible as possible with you because this is completely out of your control. And what I've told my leadership team is we need to be as flexible as possible. I want everyone to work with our staff to make sure that we can be as flexible as possible to help you balance your work life and your personal life. But at the same time, we've also got to get the work done. We do really important work, and we've got to make sure that work is done. And so please just keep in mind, we want to be as flexible as possible. Ryan, in a minute, will talk about the flexibilities and the options that you have. And I've told my leadership team, let's be flexible with our employees because we know this is out of their hands. But at the same time, we've got to get our job done. So I know that you all will do the best that you possibly can, and we will work with you to make sure that you can get all of that done. I know it's overwhelming at times. My two children are currently home, and although they are not, they're 7 and 11 and pretty independent, it is a little bit stressful trying to manage work and children. So I completely get that. And just remember, we want to be flexible with you, but we ask you to do the very best job you can for us as well. So I want to turn it over to Ryan Ringsred to talk about a change in the administrative leave that we were able to grant when COVID-19 began. And you received an email from me earlier this week that that is no longer an option for me to allow, but we do have other options. So that option was granted to me by the governor, and he was granting it to all state agencies to allow that admin leave for state employees, but that's not an option anymore. But we do have several other options to help you balance this navigating back to school or childcare issues or whatever you may be encountering at this point during COVID-19. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Ringsred to talk about that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And hey, everyone, this is Ryan. I wanted to take some time to talk to you guys today about following up on the Commissioner's email from last week about changes we're making to how we use administrative leave. When the pandemic began, state agencies were authorized to allow the use of administrative leave for those employees that were affected by the office closure. In addition to that, DeKalb also allowed administrative leave to cover instances where employees were affected by a school or a child care closure as well. Unfortunately, like Commissioner just said, state agencies' authority to continue to offer administrative leave for those reasons has ended. It's obviously unfortunate, like the timing, that right as we're all getting ready to go back to school, that the authority to do this ends. In addition to going back to school, we know all of our staff are facing difficult decisions on virtual learning and whether or not to enroll your kids in person or virtual in those systems who offer that choice. And also, you know, we find ourselves in a situation where childcare options in many areas of the state, as Randy just showed us, are still somewhat limited. So we recognize that in order for you guys to make these important decisions about school and childcare for your children, it's critical to know what your options are for taking leave. So Bentley, if you'll advance to the next slide. Okay, this slide details the 5 options that may be available to you when you're trying to make these decisions on how to balance work and leave. So the first option is pretty straightforward. It's just to work your regularly scheduled 40-hour work week. Option 2 is to work with your supervisor to try to determine if there's any flexibilities available. For instance, could you have starts and stops throughout the day? Could you work nights, weekends, early mornings before your kids wake up? And as the commissioner said, we've encouraged our cabinet members, our directors, managers, supervisors to be as flexible as possible in making accommodations like this. But we also have to keep in mind that some jobs, just due to the nature of the work, are just lend themselves to being more flexible than others. So as much as we can, we're going to be flexible in this area, and hopefully that helps. The third option is to request annual or personal leave for any of your 40-hour work week that you can't work due to childcare unavailability or virtual learning. The most important thing here, and I know I'm guilty of this sometimes, is to just know your leave balances. We all can go into Team Georgia and look at our leave balances at any time, and knowing your leave balances can help you make the best decision for you. The fourth option is to request FFCRA emergency paid sick leave or emergency FML as appropriate. And these are 2 new types of leave, which the commissioner sent out an email about on Tuesday, and I'm going to go into some more detail on them in the next couple slides. And then the last option is when there's no other options available, you can always request leave without pay. Hopefully, with the flexibility we're offering in option 2 here, along with the multiple types of paid and unpaid leave available to you, this will allow you to select, you know, a school or childcare option that best suits the needs of your family. Bentley, if you'll advance to the next slide. Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the 2 new leave options that are available in option 4 on the previous slide. So in March, Congress passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, FFCRA, it's a mouthful. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the act requires all employers, including DeKalb, to offer their employees 2 types of leave options. First one we're going to talk about is emergency paid sick leave. This is a bank of up to 80 hours of paid leave that is available to all DeKalb employees regardless of your tenure. So if you work here, you are eligible for this type of leave. This leave can only be used for one of 6 qualifying reasons. Now, I'm not going to read each of the 6 reasons here. They were in the commissioner's email that went out on Tuesday. But to kind of sum it up, the first 3 reasons are related to an employee quarantining, sheltering in place, or showing symptoms of COVID and seeking treatment. And any emergency paid sick leave granted for those 3 reasons is paid at your regular rate of pay. The last 3 reasons are related to caring for someone impacted by COVID. And so that would include school closures and childcare closures, which cause you to have to care for your child or virtually school your child. And those are paid at 2/3 of the regular rate of pay. Regardless of the reason for using emergency paid sick leave or the rate of pay that is in place, emergency paid sick leave is always subject to both daily and aggregate caps or maximums on the amount that can be paid, and those caps change based on the reason, the qualifying reason you're using. Bentley, if you'll advance to the next slide. Okay, the next one is emergency FML or family medical leave. And so what's going on here is emergency FML as part of the FFCRA essentially just adds a qualifying reason to your already existing 12 weeks of family medical leave protections that all employees are afforded. And to be eligible for this, you do have to have been at DeKalb for at least 30 days. You have to have been employed for 30 days. The additional qualifying reason that this provision adds is an inability to work because the employee is caring for their child whose school is closed or childcare is unavailable. One important thing to note here is, unlike all the other types of FML, this type is paid at 2/3 of the regular rate of pay after the first 10 days, which is unpaid. The pay, just like the emergency paid sick leave, is subject to a maximum cap. This one is $200 a day or $10,000 in total. Keep in mind, this just adds a qualifying reason to your already existing FML protections of 12 weeks every year. So some employees may actually have less than 12 weeks because they previously utilized some of their FML. And if you utilize FML for this reason, it may impact the full 12 weeks later. So say you use 2 weeks for this, and then later you're out for some surgery or something, you would only have 10 weeks left. There are a few points that apply to both types of FFCRA leave that I want to mention here that I think are important. The first one, and this one is really important, is kind of the definition of a couple of terms. For the purposes of these types of leave, school is considered closed, and I'm using my air quotes with my hands for the word closed, if any portion of their curriculum is taught virtually. This would include instances where a parent selects virtual learning over in-person learning for their child. So because virtual learning is offered, we are considering that school to be quote unquote closed, and therefore FFCRA leave is an option for you if you choose virtual learning for your child. On a similar note, childcare is considered unavailable if an employee chooses not to send their child to childcare due to concerns over COVID-19. So say at the childcare center that my son attends, they had a couple positive cases and they sent me a note. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure I want to send my son back there, right? So we're going to consider that childcare to be unavailable, which would then allow these FFCRA leave options to kick in. So the first important point are those two definitions of closed and unavailable. The second thing that applies to both of these types of leave that I think is important for you to know is that either of these types of leave may be used intermittently or in full. And so obviously in full is pretty straightforward. If I want to go on emergency paid sick leave for 2 weeks straight for my full 80 hours and I have 2 weeks, I can do that. But another example might be that, hey, for option 2 on that previous slide, with the flexibility my boss allows me, I can string together 6 hours worth of work every day. We're using weekends, mornings, however I do it. And so that gives me 30 hours a week. But based on virtual learning my 2 or 3 kids, I just can't do more than 30 hours a week. Well, I could use intermittently 2 hours a day of emergency paid sick leave, for the next 40 days or however long it takes me to hit my 80-hour limit to make up the difference. And that would allow me to preserve my annual leave if I had a bank of that built up, or give me an option if I didn't have any annual leave. The one thing to note there is that during the time where you're using emergency paid sick leave, you would be paid at 2/3 of your regular rate of pay. But I think it is important to note that it can be used intermittently. It's not an all or nothing deal. The next thing to know about these two types of leave is that they can be combined. So for example, say my children's school is starting back at the end of August, and they're going to do the whole the whole fall semester in 12 weeks between, September 1st and Thanksgiving. And I've got 4 children and I'm doing virtual learning, and there's just no way I can work for those 12 weeks, right? Because I've got to do virtual learning for 4 children, 6 hours apiece, and I'm just spent after that. Well, obviously I have my 12 weeks of emergency FMLA that is an option for me to use there. The downside to that is the first 10 days are unpaid. And after that, the next 10 weeks would be paid at the 2/3 rate. Well, I could combine my emergency paid sick leave and my emergency FML and use the 80 hours of emergency paid sick leave to cover the first 10 days of FML so that I'm now in paid status for the entire 12-week period. Now, one thing to note there again is I would only be paid at 2/3 of my regular rate of pay, but I'd be paid for the entire 12-week period. The next thing to know about these types of leave, and again, this applies to both of them, is that Congress has only authorized these types of leave through 12/31/2020. So maybe that gets extended, maybe it doesn't. None of us have a crystal ball, but as of right now, we only have the authority to offer this type of leave through the end of this calendar year. So if you're thinking about using it, I think the fall semester would be a good time to look at it. Is it appropriate for you? The last thing that applies to both of these types of leave is that HR has special leave request forms for these types of leave. So if you plan to request either type, please contact Rhonda Gunner, Sabrina Henry in HR so that they can get you the appropriate form and help you with any questions you have about them. So that's all I have on the FFCRA leave. And I think I'll turn it back over to the commissioner now to introduce our division updates.
Thank you, Ryan. Great job of explaining what is a little bit complicated the first few times you hear it. I would encourage you go back and read the email that I sent on Tuesday. It does have 2 attachments with more information on those 2 types of leave. So you have some options, which is good, and I hope that gives you some information as you begin to plan what your schedule is going to look like when school goes back or whatever your childcare needs are at this point. So next, what we're going to do are division updates. And if you've been to any of our all-staff meetings recently, we've used this format before. It's a 3-2-1 format. It keeps it more interesting, in our opinion. So each executive cabinet member is going to do a 3-2-1 format. So they'll share 3 COVID-19 related activities, initiatives, or projects from their division, 2 accomplishments from their division, and then one shout out to another division. And we will start with Ryan.
All right, I'm back. Okay, so for our 3-2-1, for my 3 COVID-19 related projects, I'm going to start out with one that the commissioner has already touched on, but I think it's definitely important enough to deserve mentioning twice, and that is our stable payment program. Commissioner mentioned Woody Dover. He's our one-man project management team, and he oversaw and led this project from start to finish. But this, is the definition really of an agency-wide project. We had help from our IT division, literally building the application from scratch, had help from finance to help us move money around and make the payments appropriately. We had help from CCS to help us identify providers and reach out to them when necessary, and a big assist from CAPS to help us kind of piggyback on the infrastructure they already have in place to pay providers. So this really is an agency-wide accomplishment. And I'll just say, to literally build an application from scratch and receive 3,800, whatever that number was, 3,871 applications, process them, approve them, and get almost $40 million out the door in less than 60 days. I mean, I'm just really proud of that. I would say that's unheard of when you're thinking of state government. So really proud of that project. The next one I want to mention is our virtual orientation that we developed and implemented. Our HR unit has worked hard as this pandemic started to develop and implement a virtual orientation so that all of our divisions could continue hiring and onboarding staff while our office was closed. I've talked to some of my colleagues and peers at other state agencies, and it looks like we're one of the few who was able to do this. I talked to a couple state agencies where they kept doing in-person orientation and onboarding and shifted their hiring to once a month instead of once every pay period. So HR's willingness to be, flexible, like the commissioner mentioned earlier, and come up with a process that worked really allowed us to support our division so they could keep hiring and onboarding staff, and we could keep meeting the needs of Georgia's citizens. The last COVID-19 related project I want to mention is our virtual audit process that was developed and implemented. So our audits and compliance team was able to develop a process to continue their work really without missing a beat, to seamlessly shift from in-person audits where we're doing observations on site and doing things like looking through records and counting meals on site, to a totally virtual process as quick as they did is certainly something that deserves recognition. So for the 2 accomplishments for the Finance and Administration Division, the first one that I'm extremely proud of is we reimbursed 5 million meals that were served across the state by our Emergency Summer Food Service Program. Our nutrition services team worked extremely hard on extremely short notice to activate the Emergency Summer Food Service Program, and worked really hard and quickly to get sponsors approved so the kids could have access to these nutritious meals during this difficult time. So we're really proud of that. The last accomplishment I want to mention is to recognize our finance and our facilities unit specifically for working to secure PPE so that at the right time we can reopen in a safe and appropriate manner. As you can see from the slide, we were able to get over 5,000 masks, 1,000 pairs of gloves, 1,000 bottles of hand sanitizer, and many other supplies, so that at the right time and in the right way, when we are ready to reopen, we can do that safely. And I know it may not seem like a big accomplishment to like buy supplies, but if any of you tried to get, you know, something like Clorox wipes from your local grocery store, you know how hard it is right now to find some of this stuff. And so I'm really proud that we were able to get this so that when we do open up, our staff will be safe and feel secure coming to the office. And then lastly, I want to give a shout out to our Child Care Services Division. I want to mention them specifically for developing their virtual visit process. And not, obviously, it's great that they developed it, but what I'm really speaking of is their willingness to share what they learned and the processes they used and the technology they used, so that our Nutrition Services Division and our Audits and Compliance Division could learn from that and take advantage of some of the work that CCS had already done. And that allowed us to more efficiently and effectively come up with a virtual process for ourselves so that we could better serve child care providers across the state of Georgia. So thank you to CCS. And with that, I'll turn it over to Pam.
Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate that shout out. That's awesome. Hello, everybody. Can't wait to see you again. I want to go quickly and do my 3, 2, 1 so we can move on. Our COVID-related projects have everything to do with being responsive to childcare during this time and to families. Childcare is stressed. You know, those that are open, they need families there. Families are stressed because they need to find childcare. So one of the first things we did was updates so that when families search for childcare on qualityrated.org, they can see which programs are open. And that was a big accomplishment. The commissioner mentioned that earlier. The second thing that we did to qualityrated.org is happening right now. It's in process, where childcare programs can let families know if they're open to serve school agers all day to support distance learning. And it's going to be really great because families can search by that and try to find programs that are willing to serve school agers all day to help their kids do all that virtual learning, which is, you know, they need some support on that. So that's the first thing. It's all about school age right now, being responsive around people trying to make plans for their children as decisions come in from school systems. And, you know, the school systems have changed course at the last minute, it feels like, for a lot of families. And so we're trying to make sure that we can hold that balance between helping to secure for families safe and healthy places for their kids to do their distance learning, and at the same time not be a barrier to where it becomes impossible to find a place because there's too much red tape. So we're working on a temporary license for some providers so that they can serve these school-age kids all day. And we're looking at our exemptions and doing some modifications on those to serve that same population. It's a huge need right now, and our team has done a great job being very, very flexible. For our accomplishments, our team has done 667 virtual visits since May, which is amazing. I am so impressed with CCS. We had to figure it out and we had to implement. And the biggest accomplishment of that is we have actually trained providers to do visits virtually. And that was kind of a scary thing. This is going to be something that we can use after the pandemic is over for different purposes around being more accessible for providers. So we're really excited. And then I put this next thing in the life goes on category, because we don't think about that. Some people have opened new programs during the pandemic. So we've issued 116 new licenses during the pandemic because I guess some people were in process and they'd invested money, and we need to make sure that that could still be done for them. So I'm very proud of the team for that as well. And I want to give a shout out to legal. When things don't go well in childcare, sometimes very difficult decisions have to be made. And CCS during those times works very closely with legal to have some really hard conversations where we take into consideration the rules and the law, and then people, you know, families and childcare providers and the situation. And those can be really hard conversations. and they are not without emotion. And legal is patient with us and answers all our questions and helps us work through that, and we really appreciate that. And with that, I want to pass it on to Ira.
Thank you, Pam. Good afternoon, everyone. And for legal's related projects for COVID-19, we have a fully remote criminal records background check unit that is processing 150 to 200 applicants per day. Legal was able to work with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and Decal IT to set up virtual processes that allowed the department to maintain the applicant's privacy and security outside the criminal records check room. From day one, Decal has been able to maintain its targeted goal of at least 80% of criminal records requests being processed within 48 hours. Virtual OSA adverse action hearings and case filings in compliance with the new COVID-19 procedures that was set by the Office of State Administrative Hearings. Hearings are continuing virtually by telephone or video conferencing. However, legal has been able to resolve numerous adverse actions during the COVID-19 pandemic without the court's assistance. Our fully remote open records unit is processing an average of 25 open records per month. I'm proud to say that the open records unit has continued to meet all statutory deadlines by responding to requesters with responsive documents within 72 hours. This clearly demonstrates Decal's values for openness and transparency. For accomplishments, we have processed COVID-19 contracts and data sharing agreements using creative language to place unique terms into contracts, or using sections of existing contracts that might have previously been thought as superfluous. The legal unit's work allowed for the department to continue contract for services so the department can continue to meet its obligations. For example, data sharing agreement between Decal and DHS, enabling a new interface between Koala and Gateway, was drafted in direct response to COVID-19. The governor's executive order regarding daycare centers during COVID-19 state of emergency. We were very proud to be able to work with CCS and the governor's office to suggest language that was used in the governor's executive order, such as parental access, immunizations, field trips, and CPR first aid and training requirements, which allowed for the continued child care operations in the safest environment possible. And we want to shout out to pre-K instructional supports. It's a big shout out to pre-K unit and instructional support for working tirelessly in support of Georgia's children and families with enthusiasm and dedication during difficult times with limited resources. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Hey everybody, it's Susan, and Bentley is challenging me to do this really quickly. So 3 projects. Our unit has been really focused on developing virtual resources for families, teachers, and programs, and you guys have put out a lot of stuff, chats about children, toddler time, Georgia Pre-K at home. We also, during this time, have an ongoing federal grant called the Preschool Development Grant, which requires us to have an active cross-agency child council, and we did launch that during this time, and that program includes councils with members from all state-serving, child-serving state agencies. We're also right now in the process of implementing trauma-informed care trainings for Decal staff and early learning professionals. And some of you have been participating in that training, very timely for us and for early learning professionals. 2 accomplishments. We have created and offered over 80 new trainings to approximately 2,000 participants, all virtually during this time. We've also converted 215 face-to-face trainings to a virtual format and approved over 400 new virtual trainings. So our team in professional learning has been working really hard to support that early learning professionals continue to have the training that they need. My shout out is to communications. Thank you so much to Reg and our communications team that have allowed us to be able to promote all of this virtual information and training and resources to people so that they can access them. And Reg, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, it's great to be back and enjoying talking to over 600, I think 658 decalers here in the middle of the day. So thanks for joining us. A couple of things I wanted to say on behalf of communications. If you remember, all of this sort of happened to us back March 14th and 15th. We sort of went into hibernation mode that weekend because we knew we wanted to try to launch the new COVID-19 page and use that as a resource for most of the information that we were going to be sharing, whether that was, you know, Georgia's pre-K at home or toddler time at home, you know, the updates on the FAQs, all of those things. And with help from IT, I think we just did an amazing job of building this resource and actually launching it on March the 16th. We were able to get that out there. I know I talked to Connie probably multiple times over the weekend and a lot of other IT folks, and not once did they ever sound like they hated to take the call. They were totally supportive and really appreciate all of that. I do want to thank our interns at the time. They've moved on to other opportunities, but I want to thank Charles and Brianna, who were with us in the middle of March, and it was a difficult time. You either were not ready for an internship at Decal or you were all in, and they were both all in. And as Susan said, did a tremendous job in helping us post graphics of open and closed childcare programs, you know, the updates with the videos on chatting about children and all the different activities that we were doing. So I cannot thank them enough for just stepping up to the plate in that process. So they were able to help with the launch of Georgia's Pre-K at Home, Chat About Children. And then we were able to produce podcasts specific to COVID-19, including a special March 16th special edition, which I think at the time we were not recognizing social distancing. We were all in our studio. I think there were about 9 of us in there, and we were giving everybody an update on what was to be expected. And boy, if you go back and listen to that podcast, you really have a sense that we did not know how long this was going to go and how complicated it really was. But at least we were committed to keeping everyone totally informed and involved. So those are our 3 COVID-19. I really want to thank, again, our interns. At the same time, we were able to, as Ryan said, continue interviewing for a crucial position on our team, and that is the communications specialist position. And thanks to our HR team, we were able to locate an outstanding professional, Jerry Brown, who has joined us as communications specialist. He is an Emmy award-winning producer and journalist with more than 15 years experience around newsrooms and professional sports franchises, and we are thrilled to have Jerry. I can't wait to meet him. He is doing a great job virtually, helped us out with our Look Again campaign, helped us out with some of the activities around this activity today, and I just want to welcome him. It's great to have him on board. 2 accomplishments that I wanted to mention: increased social media reach and podcast listeners. We've definitely seen our social media grow during this process. I think both families and teachers and providers have all sort of turned to our Facebook and Instagram to see what's going on with Decal. And we've been able to keep those very, very active and probably better than ever before. We're about to cross the 18,000 mark on the number of likes for Facebook. So we're pretty excited about that. And then also we received a podcast award, the 26th Annual Communicators Award of Excellence, which is a testimony not to the work that we're doing, but the work that you guys are doing and continually coming through with some excellent content for our weekly podcast. And I can't thank you enough for that. And I want to shout out to CAPS and thank them. It's interesting when we send out news releases with all the social media that we do, we get a lot of contacts from CAPS applicants who have either are seeking to renew their application or check on the status of their application. And it would be very easy to just say to them, well, hang in there, it'll get better, we'll get back to you. But we have been handing those over personally to Elizabetta and her team, Donna Johnson, Tina Kroon, some outstanding folks and their teams that are working on these things. And they have made these people feel very special. They reach right back out to them, are able to check on the status of their application and get them back in the loop. So I just want to thank CAPS for the outstanding job that they've been doing virtually and through this whole process over the past several months. And that's it for communications.
Hi, this is Elizabetta. I'm going to talk a little bit about CAPS. We have been very busy in the CAPS division with COVID-related projects. And many of you may have heard of our Essential Services Workforce Priority Group. It means that we help provide assistance to people in occupations like first responders, medical occupations, childcare personnel, and those that work in the food supply chain like grocery workers and restaurant workers. We have processed 8,283 referrals that were received since we began that priority group on April 1st, 2020. We stood it up in a matter of a couple of weeks and got staff trained, and the staff have done a wonderful job processing those referrals, which has resulted in filling 600 or so slots. We began with 500 slots and recently added 500 more for a total of 1,000. CAPS is also helping support and stabilize childcare providers. Randy in his slide showed that more CAPS childcare centers are open than regular centers, so maybe our payments are helping with that, who knows. But we are paying providers whether they are open or closed, and whether their CAPS children are present or absent, as long as those children attended at least one time since March 1st, 2020. CAPS is also helping to support families who are enrolled in CAPS by waiving the activity requirement for families that have experienced the COVID-19 related job loss or hours reduction. So we will renew their scholarships even if they are not meeting our approved activity requirement in those circumstances. And of course, we are working towards figuring out exactly how to support school-age children who are going to be in a distance learning model at their school system and are not able to stay home to do it and have to go into a childcare program. So more to come on that. For our accomplishments, I think the most noteworthy one I'll focus on is the first one, and that is that CAPS has done 100% of our work virtually since mid-March. For many divisions, that may not be that spectacular because most of our other divisions are primarily home-based. But CAPS had over 100 staff that were Atlanta-based and that got moved home overnight. And so since they got moved home, we have registered 17,617 applications. So shout out to our admin assistants who do that. We have processed 25,739 applications. Shout out to scholarship there. We have processed 12,324 renewals and 5,379 case changes. So shout out to family support on those. And then our adverse action and claims team has processed 2,257 work items And our quality assurance and training team has onboarded and trained 21 new staff since March 15th, 100% virtually. And I think that's pretty amazing as well. We're working on standing up a virtual lobby and making adaptations to our payment system to fit all these new processes. And then finally, I just want to give a shout out to Quip. I have been so impressed with the innovation and creativity that they have shown in the way they have adapted, particularly their quality rated program, so that it can continue when assessors aren't able to go out and make visits to do assessments, which is a big part of the rating process. So shout out to them for that. They've also been instrumental in helping us to transition those 3,000 quality rated subsidy grant slots in families that are in those slots into CAP scholarships. They have collected thousands of documents for us. So we very much appreciate their help. And with that, I turn it over to you, Bentley.
Thank you, Elizabetta, and thanks to everyone as we're going through these. I'm going to go quickly to get us back on schedule a little bit since we started late. First of all, though, I just want to say that I could not be prouder of the Quip division and, as Elizabetta said, all the innovation and accomplishments they've done. In terms of our COVID-19 related projects, we have been able to continue rate programs, quality rate programs. So we've rated over 430 programs. And we've also done a lot during this time to increase our QR staff capacity. And I think that's been really important. Our community coordinators have created 18 regional early education networks, and we've awarded 5 two-generation innovation grants. And so again, the work goes on, and I think both of these are ways that we're supporting providers and families. And then, as many of you know, we are an early Head Start grantee, and in that grant, we serve over 180 infants and toddlers, and we've been able to maintain that and do that virtually. So yay to our early Head Start team. In terms of some quick accomplishments, I have been most impressed with the way that we have increased our data capacity, the research slides Randy showed us, and then also Laura Wagner's team has worked hard with the call center to increase our data and our understanding of the call center and the way that we work with qualityrated.org. I would say that's much stronger now than it was when we started. And again, just the ongoing reporting and data that our research team does. So big thanks to everyone in Quip. So we've got one more slide after this of our 3-2-1s, and I'm going to give a shout out to IT. But Dennis, just as a point of process, after you're done with your 3-2-1, before you make your big announcement, I'm going to change the presenter to Shawnell because we think that she'll be able to run the videos, and your big announcement includes a video. So with that, my shout out to IT. Just thank you for all the work you have done in helping us with our data and doing all of our math emails. And we just work side by side, and we couldn't have done the slides that Randy showed you, could not have been done without IT. And so with that, Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All righty. Thank you, Bentley. As you heard earlier, IT's kind of been mentioned in all the division updates. So I'm really proud of all the stuff that IT has done. I mean, we're pretty much involved in everything but all the divisions. But a lot of these you've already heard because we actually wrote these applications for a lot of the other divisions. The stable payment application process really was a major turnaround. It took us about 10 days to do that. It's a huge win for the team. It's really just a simple way to fill out the application to determine the eligible amount available to receive these funds. So a big shout out to my team for that. As you heard earlier from a couple of people, we've already paid out about $38.5 million on that. Also, the next one is the CAPS pre-screener application process. That's really the development team put an online parent referrals on the quality rated website. It was due to the child care temporary closures at the beginning of COVID-19. This really included an online application for essential services workforce and parents needing CAPS assistance. There's a lot of work around that, like around Gateway, around the pre-screener CAPS data, and really getting from GTA to Gateway and back and forth. A lot of work there. We've already done about, referral process has been about 5,400 already that need CAPS assistance. A lot of work has been done around the virtual visiting, like Pam had said earlier, Really, we've modified existing, the required reporting functionality in Koala to provide the child care services an alternative way to monitor these child care programs remotely and meet their federal obligations, and by adding a new annual report, inspection report out there for people to pull. So the next big accomplishments for us, I mean, those are huge, obviously, but our team, we've been working very closely with Reg and communications. We've done a ton of work around web content and emails. Since March, we've done 80+ deployments of content changes to our websites, and over 5 million emails have been distributed out through various systems. So I guess our big project for the year was our migration to our infrastructure and applications to on-prem to the cloud. We have a small data center there, not much bigger than a closet. We've moved all that out to a big Microsoft data center. It's a huge win for DeKalb. It really enhances our reliability, our security, and it really averts any disaster or anything that might happen in the future. And it gives us a full disaster recovery plan just in case we got hit with malware, any kind of ransomware attack, to be able to recover quickly. And also, we're not tied to the building anymore. And as you can see, you never know when you have to go out for some kind of an emergency. So we're much, much better off with failover capabilities from one region to another in case we ever have any problems. So huge win. It's probably put us 10 years ahead of any of the other state agencies around Georgia. I want to do a big shout out to HR and finance, really for HR for their virtual onboarding and doing all of the work around that and getting all the staff. As you may or may not know, we've continued to hire people over this time. That's a big, big deal. And to get all these people done remotely has been a huge win for us. And also for dealing with all the COVID-19 related issues that we've been having to deal with, coming up with new policies, procedures, and all around that. It's just a huge, huge win for those guys to put all the work in for that. And also for finance for really helping support IT on these quick turnarounds to ensure the agency continues to provide IT services. A lot of this stuff, it's last minute, and finance has to push some of this stuff through for us. So thanks, HR and finance, for all of your hard work around that.
All right, thank you, Dennis. And now I'm switching to Shawnell as the organizer.
Thanks, Bentley. I'm going to show my screen in just a second, and I'm going to cross my fingers and take a deep breath and hope that this video and sound works. If not, we will definitely email and post on Polar. So let's give it a try. I'm going to show my screen. Can you see it, Bentley?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to play, and let's see what happens.
No audio.
So Shawnell, I don't think the audio was working. I think that was fine for that video. So I think if you want to share your screen back to me, then we can go back to Dennis's slide to explain that, and then we'll turn it back over to the commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sounds good. Sound was clear on my end. I'm sorry I didn't work through the stream, probably a delay in the stream. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Bentley, and I'm going to make you the presenter.
Okay. Okay, Dennis, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it. So hopefully everybody heard it. Maybe it was just the presenters were on the phone, so the sound went through the computer system. So hopefully everybody heard that. So if you next slide. So if you saw that and was able to read that or hear it, we're introducing the iPhone decal. It's way overdue, I think. I know a lot of people have been asking for it. So in August, you're going to be eligible to upgrade to an iPhone if you want an iPhone, if that's your phone of preference, or keep your Android if that's your phone of preference. Right now, going in the future, you'll have a choice. So I hope that makes everybody happy. I know I've heard a lot of people on iPhones. So we will also be enabling much more phone capability. Today, your phone is pretty locked down and it's really unusable. So we're going to open the phone up to make it much more usable for you guys to use your camera. We're also putting the Office suite on there, so you'll be able to get your email, OneDrive, any of the Office suite that you used to have on your phone. You'll be able to retrieve all of your documents from OneDrive, be able to attach it to your emails, all from your phone. So you'll be able to do that both from the Android or the iPhone. So most of you already qualify for these upgrades. We did a quick count, over 480 or so qualified. So what we're going to do to make this more orderly, we're going to reach out to you over the next few weeks and start a process to upgrade your phones. And you'll be asked if you want an iPhone or an Android device. And just tell us what you want. We'll get one ordered for you, and they'll come to your house. All you have to do is turn them on, and everything will be set up automatically remotely. So some new technology that we have, we're really proud of it. We're working really hard. We have several people right now going through a pilot program to testing all this to make sure it's really orderly for you. So once we get these all out initially, then there'll be an upgrade process going forward. So you can't just upgrade every 6 months or every year, but it'll probably be something like every 2 years, folks will be available for an upgrade. So take care of these things. It's not so easy to get another one. And we'll put a process in our service catalog, ServiceNow, our IT services link on the website, on our homepage in Polar, that a order process for going forward. But initially, IT will reach out to you and speak to you about getting your iPhone refreshed or your Android refreshed. Anyway, further communications will be coming over the next few weeks, and I hope this is a welcome change for everybody. I know that I personally love an iPhone, and it took me a long time to try to adjust to an Android. So hopefully this is a positive news for everybody.
All right. Thank you, Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to turn it back over to the commissioner to answer a few questions.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dennis. That is exciting news. I hope you all are excited about the options to either have an Android or an iPhone. I think that'll be a nice little perk that we haven't had before. So obviously, Dennis's video didn't work with the exciting announcement, but we will share that. And then we also had another video we were going to show you. Was a montage of Zoom faux pas, and it was funny because I'm sure you've all experienced everything we were going to show you, and we thought it would make you laugh. But we'll make sure that we get that so you can see it. Maybe we'll post it on Polar, but we'll let you know. And Jerry Brown, who's our new communications specialist, actually put that together for us. So we want to make sure you can see it and hopefully get a laugh out of it. But we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to answer some questions that were submitted by our decal staff. And as I mentioned, what we did is we took some of the commonly asked questions because I just don't have time to answer all of them today, but we will definitely make sure we get the answers to the other questions. So first question is, what is the procedure related to notification and leave if an employee or an employee's family member tests positive for COVID-19? So I believe Robin Stevens sent some more information about that recently, but what you need to do is let HR know, and then they will work with you on the appropriate type of leave to take. Of course, that's really the most important part, especially since most of us are always at home, is you may need to take leave because you may not be feeling well, or you may need to help with a family member who is not feeling well as well. So please contact HR. They will handle it for you, and they will help you decide what type of leave you need to take while you recuperate from COVID-19. The next question, when might on-site staff return to the Capitol Hill offices? When they do, how will DECAL protect not only staff themselves, but their family members who are at risk or vulnerable? So as you know, right now, our offices are open on a very limited basis. We're open 2 days a week to the public. For a while, all of state government was closed. Although our work for the most part has continued normally as we work from home, but we did need to open our office in case anyone needed to drop any documents by, or they felt like they needed to see someone in person. And so our 7th floor reception area is open on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then there are a few other staff members that are also coming in, and several staff members have been coming in from the beginning every now and then to do certain things that they just couldn't do from home. So as far as when will we open 5 days a week, we don't know yet. We're still monitoring that. With the increase in cases recently, I don't see that happening anytime soon. So we want to be really, really careful about when we do that. So we will let you know as soon as we know something, but right now we're going to stick to the Tuesday and Thursday limited 7th floor, and anybody else that needs to come in to get some work done that they just cannot do at home. As far as keeping you safe when you're there, GBA has done a lot of improvements to the building. They've increased and enhanced the ventilation in our building. They're doing extra sanitation. If you have been in the building, there's signs on only 4 people on the elevators. They also screen you before you come in the security desk to make sure that you don't have a fever over 100, I believe. And then, as Ryan mentioned, we've secured a lot of PPE. And so when we do come back, we have masks and gloves and hand sanitizer and wipes to make sure that we remain safe. And of course, we will continue to remain socially distanced when we do come back. So a lot of details to work out with that to make sure that we can maintain that social distance. As far as if you have a family member who is at risk or vulnerable, as you might remember, we did a survey, it's probably been a month ago, trying to just get an indication of what staff members would be impacted by having a family member that they live with or care for that's at risk or vulnerable. And we have that information, and your supervisor will know that we need to be flexible with that as well to make sure that you remain healthy and don't put your family member at risk. The next question, when might field visits resume? When they do, what measures will be in place to protect field staff? So that's another question that we don't have an answer to yet. We have been talking about it a lot, and we've been talking about what are the benchmarks and the metrics we use to determine when it's safe for our staff to start making visits. I do want to point out that a few visits are still happening. You know, if we get a complaint from CCS, we've got to go out and investigate. Some of those things just cannot be done virtually. So they are happening on a very limited basis, but they are happening at this point. So although it's still in draft form, I will tell you what we're thinking about. First of all, we're looking at state level data. We're looking at the number of positive cases and when that begins to decline. We're also looking at, as Dr. Bagwell-Adams mentioned, hospital capacity as well. So we're going to look at it at a statewide level, and then I'm hoping that would trigger us to look at a regional level. As Grace mentioned, you know, can't really look at it at the statewide level. You've got to look at a community-based level because things are just so different. So then we, of course, would look at a regional level to see how cases are looking in certain regions and how that hospital bed, especially critical care capacity, is looking. So we will look at that first. And decide when it's safe to go back. And we're still working out the definitive way for us to do that. Of course, when we do feel like it's safe, we will provide PPE for our staff. And so masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, all those things that we've talked about, and we're looking into the face shields as well. And then we'll also, you know, we'll have some extra data points on top of that, and some extra procedures on top of that, where we would only allow our staff to visit one program a day. And of course, before we even visit that program, we would make sure that they didn't have any positive COVID cases recently or any type of outbreak. So we're doing everything we can. More information to come on that, as it's fairly complicated to figure that out since it's not our data that we're trying to analyze to make these decisions. But we're going to be as careful as we can before we send everyone back out to do site visits. And I will say, virtual visits are going very well. And so I'm thankful that we have that in process so that we can continue to monitor because we still have that responsibility. The next question, can staff be reimbursed for parking? So although the payment for parking comes out of your paycheck and it looks like DECAL is doing it, that goes directly to the Georgia Building Authority. So you're paying the Georgia Building Authority for access to parking. And they have not indicated that they will be reimbursing for that. They consider that access to the building to park at any time. If you don't want to continue paying for parking, you can always cancel your parking and then get back on the list to get parking. Again, I don't know exactly what the wait list is at this point, but that is an option. And then the final question, can staff still work flexible schedules currently? What about if the Capitol Hill office is reopened, but staff with children cannot or do not want to put them in care or school? Will they still be able to telework and work flexible schedules? So I think we've addressed this kind of throughout our presentation. Yes, I think the key word is flexible, and I encourage you to please just have an open line of communication with your supervisor on what your needs are. Make sure, we've done well. We've done really well these past almost 3.5 months at this point, and we want to continue to be flexible because we know it can be stressful at times. And so, yes, we will continue to be flexible. We will continue to allow telework, but I just encourage you to please have an open line of communication and honest conversations with your supervisor so they know what's going on and they know what your needs are so that they can work with you to the best of their ability. And then if we can't work, around that schedule, then you've got those leave options that Ryan talked about, and you can revisit in your email. So I think those are all of the questions at this point. Again, we will answer the other ones and we'll let you know when the FAQ is updated. Bentley, I'm going to close unless there's anything else you want me to share.
No, I think this is great. Just again, apologies for the videos not loading properly, but we'll get those sent out.
Great. So again, thank you for being on our webinar. I know we're just a few minutes late. We had almost 660 attendees, so thank you for being attentive for 2 hours. We really tried hard to make it entertaining, but those videos didn't work, but that's okay. That's just how it works sometimes. But I hope that your takeaway is that Decal is still working as a team like we always do. The work is still getting done. It still continues, and it's absolutely incredible. I hear about it probably more often than you all do, but it is absolutely incredible the work that Decal continues to do in a very different environment for many of us. So I want to say thank you to each of you for continuing to work through that, and know that we will continue to be flexible, and know that you're going to have to try to figure out a balance between work and personal life, and sometimes that might be out of balance a little bit, but that's where I encourage you to really talk to your supervisor about what your needs are, because we want you to feel good. We want you to have the least amount of stress that you can during these times. We want you to protect yourselves and take care of your family, but we've also got to get our job done, and that's continuing. That was clear in every presentation I heard today. The work is continuing at Decal, so I know we can continue to do it. Just do the best that you can. So I will leave you with that. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you for being a part of the Decal team, and I hope that you stay well, and we will talk again soon. Have a great rest of your day.